Yeah, so I wrote my first three novels comparatively quickly and innocently in my 20s. And they were kind of hardball thrillers set in a kind of 90s Manchester, kind of the Manchester of my childhood. Um, and then I was doing some other things. I was writing, kind of cheating on novel writing with screenwriting, but really Oxblood just took a very long time to write. I wanted to kind of revisit that world, but from a female perspective, from multiple female perspectives. A great grandmother, a grandmother, and a teen mother, who kind of Oxford alternates between these three perspectives. And that was a kind of, there's a bigger moral canvas, it was just there was plenty more moving parts, and which meant plenty more to go wrong as well with those perspectives. And so I had to take my time. It kind of forced me to take my time, and so it was about 7 or 8 years all then. So I think that's why it took a lot longer. So it wasn't that I wasn't writing; I was just writing very slowly. I'm not saying that I get it there, I get it right, but there had to be something on the line. It had to kind of make it worthwhile.
Yeah.
And it is fiction, it isn't autobiography, but the novel is set in a time and place, certainly a place within Shore, mostly in South Manchester, Greater Manchester. And I have relatives from there, and a lot of those voices, those female voices, I was kind of soaking up when I was a kid, when I was growing up, and so I had a lot of that as a resource to draw on. And again, not to suggest that Oxblood is any way a volume of my memoirs or it is narrative nonfiction. This is a novel, but these voices and these places I wanted to kind of give expression to in fiction, and I wanted to do some justice to that. So I knew it was going to take a while. Part of it is that it is kind of ostensibly set in the kind of underworld Manchester of my previous book. So, and it is, ostensibly a standalone prequel to those books. So I was kind of working backwards, but also it's the Manchester of my older relatives. It's the Manchester that I can almost reach but can't quite touch, and that's the one you kind of feel homesick for. It's the thing that you never actually you almost experienced, and that's the attempt to conjure something in fiction. The kind of specificity, the regional specificity of a time and place that kind of informed who you are and who you became. And regional specificity is something that I come to fiction, to narratives, to stories, to novels for. It might be quite an old-fashioned concept. This idea, Ralph Ellison used to say, the route to the universal is through the local. And there are a lot of other, visual narrative mediums that kind of ignore that, in a kind of globalized streaming world where stories don't really take place in a particular time or place. All those kind of interesting edges are sanded off, aren't they? To kind of, the idea is that it will appeal to a more kind of globalized market, and so you don't have to worry about that. But for me, I still believe in that kind of that tenet, that principle, that to make this resonate. When I'm reading fiction translation from a place I've never experienced or a time I've never experienced, what I'm responding to is the specificity of that, what it feels like for that protagonist, that narrator. And that was something that I wanted to attempt to replicate on the page. I want to bring that to Oxblood and all my writing. I love genre, and I think genre informs everything I write in some capacity or other. I teach crime writing at the University of East Anglia, and I have a very elastic definition, which maybe might not it might not correlate with contemporary market definitions of the crime novel. But I mean, it's that famous Auden essay, The Guilty Vicarage, where he's writing and saying that whatever Mr. Raymond Chandler's doing is certainly not crime writing. A century later, who now would, argue that Raymond Chandler wasn't writing crime fiction? He's the crime canon, for God's sake. And that's certainly not to compare my own literary output with someone like Raymond Chandler. But this idea that genres are very fluid, elastic concepts, and they're just kind of, they're frameworks, they're fluid frameworks. They're a way to kind of represent reality in a really distinctive way. And there's something to push against as well. You can take the bits out that you don't want, and you can vandalize them and repurpose them. It places your writing in continuity with other different kind of literary lineages and other different voices that you can kind of write back to. And that for me is genre. So it is a kind of crime novel of sorts, I guess, depending on where that might not kind of sway where it goes on the shelf in Waterstones.
Yeah, definitely.
But for me, I suppose it is a crime novel, even though it's a kind of novel about language as well, and a kind of regional language, vernacular. That's kind of vanishing as well in some ways. It is a period novel, I guess. But it's a crime novel to me, at least. I hope they feel like they've kind of experienced a time and a place with a level of kind of truth to it, you know, in the way of that fictional truth, that emotional truth. I hope it's not a completely kind of miserable, mawkish novel. You know, I think it probably sounds like that when you're trying to explain it. To me, I think it's quite a funny book in some ways. It's not, you know, I wanted to capture the complexity of that particular time and that place and those characters' experiences. And so it couldn't be kind of blanket devastation and miserablest experience, because I would deny the truth of that. So I think it has a kind of maybe a modern northern sense of humor. I think some readers in the Northwest have responded to it and told me that they found parts of it funny. So I'll take that at least.